Welcome back. What I thought we'd talk about briefly is the archetypes of the landscape. And when we're creating garden rooms, there are a few things that we sense inside ourselves, and it's really just a matter of being aware of them. So I have an example here of someone who's out walking on a field or a meadow, and there's kind of some slope off here and a view, and it can be quite a lovely place to be. And what you will find, though, is that you won't spend a lot of time there because you can't really sit down unless you have a blanket, and even then it's not all that comfortable. So we start to think, well, what would make a person feel comfortable? And one thing might be having some place to sit. So here we have your typical park bench, which is out in the middle of the open space usually, and it can be nice to rest for a while, but I often find when I'm on a park bench that I'm either too hot or it's too windy and kind of chilly, or there's just something, I don't feel all that secure. It's like people can walk right up behind me, and it doesn't always feel very comfortable. So the next thing that you might consider is, what would it feel like to this person to have a little bit of shelter overhead? What if we drew a little bit of a tree here? How would that feel? And right away that feels like just so much more comfortable. And if we added some bushes around the base of this tree, it starts to feel like quite a cozy, protected viewing area. So in the archetypes, this is sort of like a cave feeling. It's like there's something around us at the back and a little bit over our heads. So it's a nice protected space. And the meadow itself can stay quite open, but you can see the land sort of falls off here. And although having a forest down the hill is nice, what would make it kind of feel even a little better is if we had a few bushes that kind of came to the top edge of it. And you can see as soon as I draw these bushes in here, then this starts to feel like its own space. It has a sense of enclosure, and it's quite interesting. So now this bush right here would act as a great backdrop for some flowers, and you can probably see where I'm going with this. Is now this starts to feel like something that you could create in your landscape within your fence lines. And there are some interesting rules about what size do things need to be, and that sort of thing, and I'm going to cover those in a minute. So if we looked at a couple of pictures, here's an example where the people have their patio over here. It's kind of hiding a little bit behind this one bush, but beside them is kind of open water and open lawn. And as we get closer to the trees at the back, the bushes start to get a little bit higher and a little bit more variety. So this is often called a living edge, where there are a variety of plants, and there might be berries and bushes and butterflies and bees, and the creatures will come in and out of the forest space into the open areas occasionally. But as you know, the creatures don't stay in the open areas because it's not that comfortable. So this would be a smaller version of that, where we have a patio space, and there's a little pond here and some low plants. So they can see over here into the open lawn, and there is a lovely sense of enclosure here. So it feels like a great place to sit, where you have some comfort and not feeling like your furniture is just plunked out there in the middle of the lawn. So here's an example where someone put some furniture in the middle of a forest. And you can see that even though there's a little bit of open space around it, that style of furniture or that size of furniture actually feels a little bit out of place. Like it would be nice for a quick cup of tea, but it's not some place you're going to hang out in. So this is all interesting information when we're thinking about, well, what does a room feel like? How should it feel? And what is comfortable for us? And what is it that we're really trying to achieve by creating garden rooms in the first place? Now, there is a man named Rob Steiner who is famous for inventing the Law of Significant Enclosure. So he has determined that when you have a certain horizontal space, the vertical space that comes up to the side of that area should be at least 1/3 of the horizontal space. So if this were 18 feet long, then 1/3 would be 6 feet high. And he said this is kind of an optimal height that you will find works best for having a sense of it being just right. And if similarly, the fence over here being 6 feet tall will also contribute to this space feeling correct. So that is one example. And then I have another one here where we're having a smaller patio. So in this case, this 10-foot patio is next to a planting area that's about 3 feet high. So that's a nice proportion again. It's 1/3 of the patio. However, if we look at the whole space as a room and not just the hard surface, then we might say, well, this whole space might be 18 or 20 feet across, in which case the 1/3 rule would be 6 feet. And so you can see that the 6-foot fence works as well. So we have the 10-foot patio with its matching 3-foot heights, and then we have the whole space with the matching 6-foot height. So this is really important to start to see the bigger picture, not just how big the patio itself is. And when we look to this side of it, where we have the 10-foot patio beside the 6-foot fence directly, it feels tighter and smaller and not as spacious. And yeah, there's just a sense of, I've used the word meanness before. It's like it's a little bit too small and not gracious. So I have a couple of pictures. Here's one where there is about an 8-foot section of deck on the ground here that's part of a boardwalk. And when we see that these 2 chairs are tucked in here with these tall grasses in behind it, it makes for such an inviting picture. And so what is it? It's the fact that this is probably 8 feet wide and this is about 3 feet tall. So again, that proportion starts to come into play there to make it feel really quite lovely. So the larger the space, the larger the open area, the taller that the trees can be around the edges of it to make it feel right. So in our landscapes right now in the city, we often have properties that are too tight for the size of the houses and the trees. And that's why things get out of scale. One of the big problems is when people have spruce trees in their front gardens or front lawns, and they're just taking over the whole space, and people feel so bad that they need to take that tree down because it's big, it's beautiful, it has birds and so much going on, but it's also towering over the house, and it's causing root issues and foundation issues, and it just feels like a threatening presence inside the house when things get out of proportion like that. So here is an example of 2 sitting spaces. So this one is up near the house, and it's just a smaller landing kind of shape, and people walk through here and down the stairs. So overall, this is a tighter space with a little bit of smaller plantings around it. And then out here in the dining area, you can see there's low plants around the edges. And if we're looking at the size of this patio, it might be 10 or 12 feet. So now the 3-foot bushes are feeling right. But then the overall space, those taller trees are starting to come in and make that whole space feel like it has so much variety and interest and nice proportion. Here is a typical bungalow backyard, and here's a patio furniture on a large section of exposed aggregate concrete patio. And what we see here is that if it were just the low plants, this probably wouldn't feel quite as awesomely comfortable. So I think what's going on here is the proportion of the patio is going to be overall probably about 20 feet across, if not a little bit more. And the height of the garage is actually what's giving it the sense of significant enclosure, so the 8-foot wall here. So that is another great example of seeing the bigger picture. And then my last photo for this one is a 2-story home with a large fire pit patio and a large deck over here. And so this has a very wide look to it. So about 50, it's probably going to be about 50 or 60 feet across here. So in that sense, we can handle trees that are going to be upwards of 20 feet or more high, and it's going to have a nice sense of the whole property is enclosed. So within the space itself, this deck could maybe use something a little bit higher around it right here, like a tree or something, to give it a sense of enclosure on that upper level. But overall, the back of the yard feels very comfortable.